Welcome to today's lecture on the rich and enduring culture of classical Greece, a period spanning the 5th and 4th centuries BCE that marked an explosion of artistic, intellectual, and scientific achievement, from the birth of Western philosophy to groundbreaking works in architecture, theater, and history. Classical Greece established many of the core ideas and values that continue to influence the modern world. We begin with philosophy, where the towering figures of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the foundation for Western intellectual thought. Socrates challenged Athenians to examine their values through probing dialogue and moral questioning, ultimately dying for his beliefs. Plato, his student, imagined ideal forms of justice and governance in the Republic, while Aristotle, Plato's own student, pursued knowledge through logic, observation, and categorization, shaping disciplines from ethics to biology. Literature and historical writing also flourished. Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were revered as moral and literary models, the very school books of Greece. Historians such as Herodotus, known as the father of history, and Thucydides, a pioneer of analytical and evidence-based historical writing, redefined how societies remembered and interpreted the past. Their works marked a shift from mythological storytelling to systematic inquiry into cause and effect. In the theater, Athenian dramatists like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides transformed ritual performance into one of the most sophisticated art forms of the ancient world. Through tragedy and comedy, these playwrights explored questions of fate, justice, human emotion, and the unpredictability of the gods. Theater festivals such as the Dionysia became civic events where philosophical and political questions were staged for mass audiences. The innovations of these dramatists, such as Aeschylus's use of multiple actors, Sophocles' dramatic structure, and Euripides' psychological realism, set standards that remain influential in drama today. Architecture in classical Greece reflected ideals of harmony, proportion, and civic pride. The Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders became visual signatures of Greek aesthetic values, culminating in masterworks like the Parthenon, a symbol of Athenian power and devotion to the goddess Athena. These architectural principles would be revived during the Renaissance and neoclassical periods and continue to inspire public buildings today. Finally, classical Greece was also a time of scientific inquiry and innovation. Thinkers like Hippocrates, Euclid, Archimedes, and Aristophanes advanced medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. The blending of observation and reason laid the groundwork for the later scientific tradition. Institutions like the Library of Alexandria, founded in the Hellenistic period that followed, built upon classical Greek foundations to promote cross-cultural learning and experimentation. In sum, classical Greek culture was not a single achievement, but a constellation of revolutionary developments in philosophy, literature, drama, history, architecture, and science. As we explore each of these fields in greater detail, we will see how the Greeks asked enduring questions about the nature of reality, justice, beauty, and human purpose, questions that remain with us today. Let's begin with philosophy and the life of Socrates, the thinker who turned questioning itself into a radical act. Classical Greece saw a flourishing of philosophers, especially in Athens during its golden age. Of these philosophers, the most famous are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates, born in Athens in the 5th century BCE, marks a watershed in ancient Greek philosophy. Athens was a center of learning, with sophists and philosophers traveling from across Greece to teach rhetoric, astronomy, cosmology, geometry, and the like. The great statesman Pericles was closely associated with these new teachings, however, and his political opponents struck at him by taking advantage of a conservative reaction against the philosophers. It became a crime to investigate issues above the heavens or below the earth because they were considered impious. While other philosophers, such as Anaxagoras, were forced to flee Athens, Socrates was the only documented individual charged under this law, convicted, and sentenced to death in 399 BCE. In the version of his defense speech presented by Plato, he claims that the envy others experience on account of his being a philosopher is what will lead to his conviction. Many conversations involving Socrates, as recounted by Plato and Xenophon, end without having reached a firm conclusion, a style known as aporia. Socrates is said to have pursued this probing question and answer style of examination on a number of topics, usually attempting to arrive at a defensible and attractive definition of virtue. While Socrates' recorded conversations rarely provide a definitive answer to the question under examination, several maxims or paradoxes for which he has become known recur. Socrates taught that no one desires what is bad, and so if anyone does something that truly is bad, it must be unwillingly or out of ignorance. Consequently, all virtue is knowledge. He frequently remarks on his own ignorance, claiming that he does not know what courage is, for example. Plato presents Socrates as distinguishing himself from the common run of mankind by the fact that, while they know nothing noble and good, they do not know that they do not know, whereas Socrates knows and acknowledges that he knows nothing noble and good. Socrates was morally, intellectually, and politically at odds with many of his fellow Athenians. When he was on trial, he used his method of elenkos, a dialectic method of inquiry that resembles the scientific method, to demonstrate to the jurors that their moral values are wrong-headed. He tells them that they are concerned with their families, careers, and political responsibilities when they ought to be worried about the welfare of their souls. Socrates' assertion that the gods had singled him out as a divine emissary seemed to provoke irritation, if not outright ridicule. Socrates also questioned the sophistic doctrine that arete, virtue, can be taught. He liked to observe that successful fathers, such as the prominent military general Pericles, did not produce sons of their own quality. Socrates argued that moral excellence was a matter of divine bequest rather than parental nurture. The trial of Socrates was held to determine the philosopher's guilt of two charges: impiety against the pantheon of Athens and corruption of the youth of the city-state. The accusers cited two impious acts by Socrates: failing to acknowledge the gods that the city acknowledges and introducing new deities. The death sentence of Socrates was the legal consequence of asking politico-philosophic questions of his students, which resulted in the two accusations of moral corruption and impiety. At the trial, the majority of the dicasts, male citizen jurors chosen by lot, voted to convict him of the two charges. Then, consistent with common legal practice, voted to determine his punishment, and agreed to a sentence of death to be executed by Socrates' drinking a poisonous beverage of hemlock. Primary source accounts of the trial and execution of Socrates are the Apology of Socrates by Plato and the Apology of Socrates to the Jury by Xenophon of Athens, both of whom had been his students. Plato was an Athenian of the generation after Socrates. Ancient tradition ascribes 36 dialogues and 13 letters to him, although of these, only 24 of the dialogues are now universally recognized as authentic. Most modern scholars believe that at least 28 dialogues and 2 of the letters were in fact written by Plato, although all of the 36 dialogues have some defenders. Plato's dialogues feature Socrates, although not always as the leader of the conversation. Along with Xenophon, Plato is the primary source of information about Socrates' life and beliefs, and it is not always easy to distinguish between the two. Much of what is known about Plato's doctrines is derived from what Aristotle reports about them, and many of Plato's political doctrines are derived from Aristotle's works, the Republic, the Laws, and the Statesman. The Republic contains the suggestion that there will be no justice in cities unless they are ruled by philosopher kings. Those responsible for enforcing the laws are compelled to hold their women, children, and property in common, and the individual is taught to pursue the common good through noble lives. The Republic determines that such a city is likely impossible, however, and generally assumes that philosophers would refuse to rule if the citizenry asked them to, and moreover, the citizenry would refuse to compel philosophers to rule in the first place. Platonism is a term coined by scholars to refer to the intellectual consequences of denying, as Plato's Socrates often does, the reality of the material world. In several dialogues, most notably the Republic, Socrates inverts the common man's intuition about what is knowable and what is real. While most people take the objects of their senses to be real, if anything is, Socrates is contemptuous of people who think that something has to be graspable in the hands to be real. Socrates' idea that reality is unavailable to those who use their senses is what puts him at odds with the common man and with common sense. Socrates says that he who sees with his eyes is blind, and this idea is most famously captured in his allegory of the cave, a paradoxical analogy wherein Socrates argues that the invisible world is the most intelligible and that the visible world is the least knowable and most obscure. In the allegory, Socrates describes a gathering of people who have lived chained to the wall of a cave, facing a blank wall. The people watch shadows projected on the wall from the fire burning behind them, and the people begin to name and describe the shadows, which are the closest images they have to reality. Socrates then explains that a philosopher is like a prisoner released from that cave, who comes to understand the shadows on the wall are not reality. Aristotle moved to Athens from his native Stagira in 367 BCE and began to study philosophy and perhaps even rhetoric under Isocrates. He eventually enrolled at Plato's Academy. He left Athens approximately 20 years later to study botany and zoology, became a tutor of Alexander the Great, and ultimately returned to Athens a decade later to establish his own school, the Lyceum. He is the founder of the Peripatetic School of Philosophy, which aims to glean facts from experiences and explore the why in all things. In other words, he advocates learning by induction. At least 29 of Aristotle's treatises have survived, known as the Corpus Aristotelicum, and address a variety of subjects including logic, physics, optics, metaphysics, ethics, rhetoric, politics, poetry, botany, and zoology. Aristotle is often portrayed as disagreeing with his teacher Plato. He criticizes the regimes described in Plato's Republic and Laws, and refers to the theory of forms as empty words and poetic metaphors. He preferred utilizing empirical observation and practical concerns in his works. Aristotle did not consider virtue to be simple knowledge as Plato did, but founded in one's nature, habit, and reason. Virtue was gained by acting in accordance with nature and moderation.